Welcome to this meeting of the North Andover School Committee. It is the 14th of January, 2021 at 7:05 p.m. And I'd ask you to rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a recognition following. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Teresi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we could just have a quick moment of silence for a longtime public servant who passed away in the last few days. Charles Salisbury served this town for many years as a selectman. Most people know him as a longtime moderator. I think he served for 20 years. Dedicated townie, did so much for this community, and just epitomized what it was like to serve the public. So just a few minutes, couple minutes, moment of silence, please. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Teresi. If I didn't already say it, please make sure you silence your devices, and this meeting is being recorded. I'm going to be reading the governor's order that is included on our published agenda. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing a strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the North Andover School Committee may be conducted via remote participation by some or all committee members and staff, as well as others invited. Specific information and the general guidelines for the remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website, www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, the members of the public who wish to hear the meeting may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 99 or Verizon Channel 28, or online at www.northandovercam.org. No in-person attendance of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on the school department website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceedings as soon as possible. And we will start with a roll call. Members in the room are Mr. Teresi?
Yes, here.
Ms. Mabley?
Here.
Ms. Vitsky-Lynch?
Here.
And Mr. McDevitt?
Here.
And remotely, we have our student representatives, Eamon Okerul.
Here.
And Mika Pelletier.
Here.
And Dr. Gilligan, if you can introduce your staff.
Dr. Mealy, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations,
is here.
and Lorene Marks, Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning.
Here. And that's everybody. Okay, so we have public comment tonight, and we do have a member of the public who wishes to join us by telephone. That is Jennifer Goldman, and she lives at 28 Jared Place. So I am going to call her into the meeting, and then we have a couple of other public comments that are in writing. So if you just give me a moment, I will put her phone number in, and she should pick up.
Hi, this is Jennifer.
Hello, Jennifer Goldman. You are in the North Andover School Committee meeting, and we welcome your public comment. You have 3 minutes, and I will be setting a timer, and we'll hear it go off if you can finish up when that happens. Thank you.
Okay, great. Hi, guys. So my public comment is as follows. The Boston Public School committees and over 30 district school committees have voted on canceling the MCATs for 2021. I'm requesting that the school committee vote to eliminate MCAT testing and a show of support for the teachers. And in return, the teacher union reps Ryan Landry and Lisa Rasmussen agree that teachers will adopt new engagement methods and synchronous teaching. As we know, our students are failing, emotionally checked out, and teachers are struggling with differing schedules every day and week. It is time to put a stable, predictable, engaging plan in place for the rest of the school year. Thanks very much for letting me have my public comment. Jen Goldman, 28 Jerry Place.
You're muted, Mrs. Picard.
Thank you. Amen. Thank you,
Can I hang
Jennifer.
up now?
You can hang up now. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Oh my goodness, the modern seance. Okay, so our next public comment, I'm going to be reading from an electronic document, and it is from David Evangelista, 28 Morningside Lane, and he reads, many parents are getting frustrated, quite frankly disgusted, that the district is not using current science when it comes to reopening schools and maintaining open schools. There are many recent studies which demonstrate schools are safe. What is happening is students are getting together with other students when school is not in session. This only increases the risk of spread and is one of the many reasons cited in the scientific evidence that schools are safe places to be. Never mind the additional mental health collateral damage and the lack of learning. Parents demand answers and deserve answers. Thank you, Mr. Evangelista. And our last public comment for tonight, I'm also going to read from an electronic document, states, this is Allison Cutts or Coots at 151 Oxford Street. Below is a letter we wanted to share with the school committee members as well as parents of winter athletes. This letter will be sent to all the superintendents in the Merrimack Valley Conference regarding the no spectator rule. We as parents of the athletes in the Merrimack Valley are writing for clarification regarding the decision to not allow parents to attend basketball games. Last week, the parents of the North Andover boys varsity basketball team submitted a letter to the North Andover Public Schools Administration inquiring as to why spectators are not being allowed to attend games. The entire email response from the athletic director will be included in the email that is sent to the superintendents. Below is an excerpt. This decision, a collective one among the Merrimack Valley school districts, was made in the best interest of our student athletes and our community in the midst of a pandemic, and we stand by it. The decision was affirmed in a meeting with superintendents this afternoon. While we appreciate the response, it has led us to further confusion and additional questions. As parents, our expectation was that we would follow MIAA recommendations, which come directly from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, EEA. Here are the protocols the EEA outlined. It clearly states that spectators are allowed. If an indoor facility has a chaperone or spectator viewing area, which allows for at least 6 feet social distancing between spectators, and the presence of spectators plus players, coaches, referees, and facility activity workers does not cause the facility to exceed more than 40% of the maximum occupancy for the indoor facility, then spectators for players under 21 years old are allowed to attend. Spectators are limited to 2 adults, parents/guardians or chaperones, and siblings of a participating player. Spectators must wear facial coverings and maintain 6 feet of social distance at all times. All MIAA member schools must follow EEA and Commonwealth regulations for spectators. 1, could you please articulate with specifics why we are not following both the EEA and the MIAA recommendations? It goes without saying that most, if not all, of the gyms in the Merrimack Valley Conference can easily accommodate the safety guidelines laid out by the EEA. The ability to view the games via live stream, while very much appreciated, is a separate issue and not getting to the heart of this question. We would also like to better understand why each town was not looked at individually and a unilateral decision was made when it comes to spectators. We appreciate the difficulties making these decisions. However, we were hoping for a more collaborative approach when it comes to the health and safety of our students and the community as a whole. We look forward to your timely response. Sincerely, the parents of the student athletes of the Merrimack Valley. So thank you very much for that public comment. And I can forward the entire public comment, which includes the letter, which was originally included, but it overstepped the 3 minutes. So I can send that to school committee members.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
You are welcome. And so we're on to our next agenda item, which is the consent agenda. And I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented in the packet.
So I'll move to accept the minutes as presented in the packet for December 17, 2020.
Second.
So moved by Mr. McDevitt and seconded by Ms. Lynch. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll have a roll call vote, starting with Mr. Teresi,
Aye.
Ms. Visky Lynch,
Yes.
Ms. Mabley,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt.
Yes.
And we're on to the student report. Oh, the chair votes yes, and it's a 5-0 vote in favor of the motion. And now we're on to the student report.
Yes, so first and foremost, Amy and I just want to say Happy New Year to both the school committee members and anyone who is watching tonight. I believe it's the first meeting of the new year, correct?
Correct.
All right, perfect. Winter sports teams, they've begun their seasons and they have started competing, or if they haven't yet, they will be starting competing in the near future. And additionally, this week was the first time students at the high school went in person for their Trimester 2 classes. So their new schedule, so everyone went to different classes this week. Something Eamon and I talked about, as seniors, we definitely take for granted that we know where all our classrooms are and we know where we're going. But something that we had noticed is a lot of the freshmen were having a bit of a difficult time finding their new classes, especially as their time in person school has been limited. So we think it might be of use at some point for the class of 2024 to have a second orientation of sorts, just because they haven't had the same opportunities as past classes to get familiar with the school and the layout and where everything is.
And then moving on from that, there is the changes to the schedule, and we wanted to provide you some feedback from the student perspective about what how we've been feeling and how the students have been feeling about the changes to the schedule. So this past week, student council members met with Mr. Young and Ms. Randall to discuss some concerns about the schedule. Now, this meeting was held regarding the initial schedule that had the end of the school day at 1:50, not the current schedule that has the end of the day at 1:30, but some of the concerns discussed at the meeting still apply. So one of those concerns was about students losing the flexibility that asynchronous days offer. So many students have crafted their schedule around time slots that work with their home life. And the flexible schedule was also valuable for students, especially upperclassmen, who are preparing for college or some sort of higher education where the schedule is much more flexible than what a school day in the typical sense would offer. So it was good preparation in that sense. Another concern was that students feel that having their remote students synchronous or live in their class will distract from their already limited time in class. Now, I heard that from some students, but the students who Mika and I have talked to, as well as Mika and I from our own experience in classes that are live/synchronous, have found that this isn't really much of an issue, because if teachers properly plan and have preparation done beforehand so that they know, what the students at home are doing and what the students in school are doing, the class runs seamlessly. A third concern with the 1:50 schedule was that students were worried they wouldn't be able to get through a full day of school on just a 10-minute snack break. Now, I think cutting back the school day to 1:30 is enough time that students won't be, hangry and very grumpy toward the end of the day. It's just enough time that you can make it through. Overall, I would say most students prefer the 1:30 end time schedule that just came out, as opposed to the initial one that was offered, the 1:50 end schedule. That is what we have for the schedule, and that's what we have for our student report tonight. Are there any questions?
We'll have a go around. Mr. Teresi,
No, well, thank you very much. Nice.
Ms. Mabley,
Thank you very much for your comments. I'm sure that the hangry part was a massive concern all around, so I'm glad that this seems a little bit better. Appreciate that.
Ms. Fiscal Lynch?
No questions. I just have a comment that I love the fact that you're looking at giving the freshmen another tour or some kind of orientation of their classes. My son is one, and that was his number one concern Sunday night. He was so nervous and anxious because he didn't know where any of his new classes were. So that was the only reason he didn't even want to go to school on Monday. So I think that's great.
Thank you very much. And Mr. McDevitt?
Just one, actually. So thank you very much, and good to see you guys as well. Happy New Year. The original schedule had us with 12 minutes and the possibility of kind of that 6 and 6 split that's out there. But now it's 20 minutes, all really at the beginning of the class. And I think, Eamon, you spoke a little bit about how that kind of sets the stage for the class. Based on some of the conversations that you had going in with Mr. Young and Mrs. Randall, reaction and response from the students, I mean, do they like that it's now 20 minutes? Do they feel that that's a more meaningful amount of time?
I think it's better because one of the initial concerns was if you have 6 minutes at the beginning and 6 at the end, it's very disruptive because you're not really getting as much out of it as you could. So 20 minutes all in one go is going to be better than even 12 minutes in one go. And so I think that's generally there's been a positive reaction to the 20-minute chunk of time.
Okay. And do you have any classes where, even though you may be at home, your teacher is, live with in-person and students at home for the entire class?
Yes, Mika and I both do. And it works pretty well. I think we found that the whole class, when it's live streamed, even at home, you get as much out of it as you would when you're in school.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I would just follow up with that. When you're at school, do you get as much as you would when you're at home? That seemed to have been the student concern.
Do you want to speak to that, Mika?
Sure. I think the classes I currently live stream the whole time are typically ones that are more based in. They're less about like group work, I guess, and like projects. It's more about like teacher-led classes. So I think certainly in that setting it works. I haven't had really too many streaming in classes that aren't based in just learning from the teacher. So I think it could definitely change depending on what class you're in. But from my experience, the classes I've been in, while I'm in school, it's working.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you all very much for what you continue to do for us. I know this is a very busy time in your senior years, and I'm looking forward to at some point seeing perhaps another student rep who you can train up into the, and I believe Mr. Jackson's working on that. So thank you very much for your student report, and you are welcome to stay and you are welcome to go. And we will move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, we have a subcommittee report, but I'd like to break it up and do that maybe second. First, I want to start out by recognizing Carolyn Ibbotson. She's our town nurse, and she has been named the North Andover on the town side Employee of the Year. Very appropriately, she works quite a bit in this COVID crisis, weekends, nights. I spend a lot of time on the phone with her. And at the same time, I'd also like to recognize our nurse leader, Cheryl Barzak, and the nurses at all 8 of our schools, because they also do the contact tracing and all that different kind of work on the weekends too. But congratulations to Caroline Ibbotson, and really appreciative and thankful of Cheryl Barzak as our nurse leader and our entire team, because they help keep our kids safe. So that leads me into my second thing that I wanted to highlight in the superintendent's report is, talking about when we close for COVID. And it really is really specific to how we look at the risks and impacts with the specifics related to the schools in making this decision. We have a task force, and we meet every week And oftentimes we're meeting daily. But they are not easy decisions to make. There's specific things, that make it more challenging to make that decision. On the Wednesday before we were coming back from the winter recess, I had put a note out that we were coming back, and then, that situation dramatically changed on that Saturday morning. And the response team got together, and that had to do with close contacts and how many there were across the entire district. So there's real specifics, and how are those going to impact the schools really come into play with that decision. Dr. Mealy, Ms. Marks, they're on the team with us along with the town manager, and we take recommendations from Cheryl and Nurse Ibbotson, Nurse of the Employee of the Year, as well as the Director of Public Health, Brian LaGrasse. So not easy to make. We always want to give people notice. We understand the hardship, but at the same time, we try to do what's best for the health and safety of everyone involved. So that's an update on that. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the subcommittee report. And that is going to be Jim, Dr. Mealy, or Holly?
Jim?
I'm going to do it. So we had our second meeting this past Tuesday, the 12th. I think we mentioned who was on the committee the last time. It's a very good committee. Some really active and people who are looking to really participate and do what has to be done. Timing was excellent in the fact that the town manager had offered to have a demographic study done, and we happily accepted. And it was an excellent report, so it's going to help us a lot in our work. So we reviewed that on Tuesday. We also talked about the different models that have had estimates done, and we're working on trying to compile a list of all the possible models there could be, and then doing the pros and cons of those. We have Stan Limpert, former school committee member, who is going to update the capacity study, because the capacity within the district and what we're going to need for capacity will be important. So he had participated in the work that was done back in 2007 or 9. But that was the last one that was done for the district, and he was part of that, so he's going to update that for us. Christy Martin is going to do research on grade distribution, because that could come into play. We need to understand what the best models are for grade distribution.
I think it's Christine Herrickle.
And then Christy Martin's going to do the, yep. I get those two confused. And then, yes, and Christy Martin's going to do the public input and help us coordinate that, because that's going to be a critical part of this, as well as making sure that we keep the public appraised of what's going on, but also providing input as we move along. And then our next meeting is on the 27th. Any questions?
I do.
Go ahead, Ms. Bailey.
Thank you. So, Christy is going to, you said, do work on public input. So is that going to be people reacting to some of the models that you've narrowed it down to, or even before that?
Yeah, so what we talked about is that we want, I keep hammering this home, we don't want to get to any point and have somebody say, have you thought about this? We want to kind of vet the models that are out there, have people hear it and maybe fill in some gaps we hadn't thought about, but also have the opportunity to say, well, have you thought about this model? And then we can still have time to do that. So that by the time we get to the point where we're presenting all the models, people have had the opportunity to participate and contribute.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions from committee members? Hearing none. Dr. Gilligan, is there any more to your report?
And you heard from our outstanding student reps on the change. Ms. Marks, could you just briefly highlight the structured learning time change from the state?
Sure. So everybody with students in the district have received notices that DESE has new requirements for district based on their whatever the district's predominant model is. Our predominant model is our hybrid model. That's what we spend most of our time in. in the district. And we are required to have 35 hours of live instruction over a 10-day school period. That's actually averaged across grade levels. So you could have one with more than 35, one with less. We are going for 35 across all grades. It does exclude pre-K and kindergarten. And live instruction counts as both combination of in-person and remote synchronous instruction. In addition, students have to have the opportunity to interact with an educator each school day. So that is a change for us for many on our asynchronous days. And synchronous instruction can involve a number of things. It's live classes online, it can be whole class, it can be breakout groups that the teacher pops into, live streaming, some small group instruction. And one of the reasons that DESE said that they wanted this check-in, they call it a check-in, on asynchronous days is just because of the mental health issues, just to try to get eyes on kids on those days that they are not with us in the hybrid model. So those plans have gone out to all the families, and the levels are all a little bit different.
Thank you, Ms. Marks.
Mm-hmm. Are there questions from the committee on this? Hearing none, I do have one question. I'm confused by the vocabulary of check-in because at the same time that the DESE says that we have to have a check-in with students, they say a check-in, it does not count as live instruction. So if you could just clarify that a little bit, I think it would be helpful to the community.
DESE actually calls it a check-in in the regs, but it has to be something that's live. So for example, an office hour does not count. An email does not count. A text does not count. So the live streaming, that connection, class meeting, those kinds of things count, as would a phone call count. But the things like the office hours that are up to discretion of student or initiative of a student, an email contact that's not an actual live conversation like we're having right now, a text, those would not count.
Okay, and those, oh, lost my train of thought, so not to worry. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Ms. Marks.
Can I actually ask just a quick question? So I have high schoolers and middle schoolers, and so, you know, those have been very much, you know, things that we've been talking about and trying to figure out. And I know that there were some updates that were coming, but I think they were coming from the building principals that went out. I'm wondering if you could just summarize what's different at the elementary level from the middle and the high school, and how that works. I know we've got 5 different schools, but you know, what's the common theme? What's the pattern that's here?
So many elementary teachers are already inviting students into morning meetings, so that is going to be a common occurrence across all the elementary schools. A lot of teachers, actually I should say across all the levels, have on their own taken the initiative and invited students in for periods of time. So I know elementary teachers, there's a teacher at one school that invites students in for their writing lessons, even on their asynchronous days. There's a teacher at another school that invites students in for their science or social studies lessons, even on their asynchronous days. I know of another teacher, and I'm sure there's more than the teachers I know of, that invite students in for their read aloud on their asynchronous days. So there are times that are already, many teachers have already incorporated that. For teachers, and we don't want to take that away from them, like the families already have that going on with those classes. That's been established by that teacher with their classroom already. For those teachers who may not have been doing that, we suggested morning meeting may be a way to start that. So, and that's our social emotional time curriculum piece, morning meeting.
And roughly how long is that?
That is, we asked elementary to average 15 to 30 minutes.
Okay, and is that in the morning and the afternoon, or is that just mornings?
It could be in the morning and the afternoon. We left some of that discretion up to the teacher, the classroom, you know, how their classroom is run and what they're doing. So we do have a closing circle, and some teachers are already inviting students into that as well. We have morning meetings in all the schools, so that occurs. And then as I said, there are a number of teachers that have already been inviting students into other parts of their day, and we did encourage them to continue that.
I guess my thought process is, I'm thinking, of families who are trying to manage multiple children, kind of getting in on those, whatever it is, the Monday or the Thursday, the Tuesday, Friday, right, of having to get those kids into morning meetings and then afternoon, and kind of the pattern of that, really, of multiple kids, multiple grades in many scenarios. So, okay.
That was a tricky part. What happened was we did not want to take away from something that was already happening that teachers were doing and students were enjoying. We didn't want to make it just morning meeting. It was something we talked about, just morning meeting. We didn't want to take away what families and students had already been engaged in.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. McDevitt, did you want to hear about the middle school as well, or were you satisfied?
I am living the middle school next week, so. I mean, if the community, if you want to give an update for the community, and I think the students talked about the high school, but that's Mrs. Marks.
Sure. Middle school is during that homeroom class meeting time. So that will be really that social emotional kind of check-in, which is really important at the middle school age. And then on the asynchronous days, teachers also have a check-in time at the end of the day for students who are asynchronous on those days.
Yeah. And are those optional?
We are highly encouraging students to participate in that. So we're not saying it's optional, but clearly we're not gonna, if a student doesn't show up, we're gonna find out why they're not showing up. If there's a valid reason, we'll come up with another way to have that check-in.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, because I was going to ask a similar thing, you've used the very pleasant word, invite them into, and it made it sound optional to me, so I wasn't sure if that was the case, so thank you.
If my daughter's watching, it's not optional.
Yes.
Let's just be clear about that.
Yeah.
Well, that afternoon piece, in the morning, and the live piece, Ms. Marks, is critical.
Right.
Attendance.
Mr. Teresi, did you want to ask any questions?
No, I just was laughing.
Okay. I remembered what I was going to ask because of this conversation. Attendance during these live stream synchronous times, attendance is taken?
Yes.
Okay. And as you say, if a student were to be absent or chronically absent, that would be a follow-up with the teacher or the guidance counselor, the principal, somebody from the school would reach out, just like any other class.
Correct.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. Dr. Gilligan.
Great. That ends the superintendent's report.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The chair's report, I have very little to report, but I do want to let everybody know that Crest succeeded in moving to its new space in Andover, so they are there. The head chair of CPAC asked me to let the community know that there will be a community chat in February. I did not see it listed on their Facebook page, but I'm sure it will be. That's where they put their information. And I would remind the community that school committee will have its community chat on February 10th at 2:30 in the afternoon. That is a collaborative day, and that time will allow for older students at least, younger students would be welcome to also be part of that chat and ask any questions they have or make comments to school committee members. And I would encourage members to reach out to me. Last time, Ms. Mabley and I hosted that community chat online, and I would love for 2 other members, or at least 1 other member, to be part of that on February 10th at 2:30. You can let me know your availability in advance. And lastly, I just wanted to say that the NEASC report, which we talked about in our last meeting, is now on the high school website if anybody wants to review the 105-page document. And that concludes the chair's report, and we have no old business, so we will move on to new business, and I am back with Dr. Gilligan.
You'll see attached the SEAM collaborative report. This is nothing to vote on. It has to be brought to the school committee every year. It's just informational. It's their FY20 annual report with their audit and financials. And the SEAM collaborative, just like the Crest collaborative, which we belong to, is one of the special education collaboratives that we're a member of and work with. So.
And the second piece of new business is what brings us all here tonight, which is a presentation of the superintendent's fiscal year 22 recommended budget. And Dr. Mealy is presenting, and I bet he will be, he's presenting online. Dr. Mealy, thank you very much.
All right, terrific and welcome. I'm really pleased to present the North Andover School District FY22 budget and 7-year plan. Next slide, Mr. Mealy. This presentation tonight is really made up of 5 parts. The strategic plan and budget directives, the FY22 recommended budget, the FY22 COVID-related budget, our 7-year plan, and our operating budget impact. This budget is based on, as you know, our strategic plan, and that is equity for all students so that we ensure that all students are provided equal access to an excellent education, a consistent and rigorous curriculum to provide curriculum that encourages students to learn to the depth and distance of their abilities, and targeted professional practice to hire and develop excellent educators who utilize data, professional development, and collaboration to continually adapt their practice and best meet the needs of our students here in North Andover. It's also based on the school committee budget directives, which we did at a former meeting. But the budget directives include looking through the lens of COVID response, retaining the necessary teaching positions to support the core teaching and learning mission, a piece on class size, and really aligning the FY22 budget with our strategic objectives, initiatives outlined in the strategic plan, and our longer-term plan. They continue to go on, and we talk about recommending, a budget and coming up with a budget to continue to provide materials, the best programming for students, and also, what we may need in the future in a post-COVID world, or if we find ourselves still in COVID. Next slide there, Dr. Mealy. So Dr. Mealy, if you could start with the FY22 Superintendent's Recommended Budget Program Summary.
So this is the roll-up that we usually look at, where we look at it by program. District-wide expenses, elementary, high school, middle school, maintenance, special education, technology, and transportation. And the budget that's presented this evening, you can see the percentage increases from this year to next year, the recommended budget, are on the right there. And I just want to highlight, so the overall is a 2.5% increase. We were very fortunate to work with our unions, our associations, anticipating this coming year being the toughest year, and we certainly hope that's the case, and there aren't any more to follow that are tougher. And so the percentage increases for salaries are the lowest for this coming year in the negotiated agreements we had. Most of them are around 1.5%. So normally, level services for us is 3%. But this year, because of that, it's 2.5%. And so I just want to highlight a couple of percentage increases, because the others are as a result of the percentage increases to the salary schedules and staff moving up in their salary schedules. And we've also made some assumptions about cost of living increases to things we contract out for our purchase. But you can see maintenance is actually down 0.95%, and that's because we purchased a couple of vehicles this year, and we do not need to purchase any vehicles next year. And then you can see transportation is up higher than any others, but that's because NRT has worked with us and frozen increases that were supposed to contractually occur the past couple of years, but they froze them, so they didn't occur, but they go into effect for next year. So that's the 2.5% is the overall budget increase, which is level services. In addition, we are separately anticipating COVID-related expenses to continue into FY22 and trying to estimate what those might be. From this list, you can see what we paid this year, or what we anticipate paying for the year, is almost $5 million. It's $4,759,000. Most of that comes as a result of OLA, providing OLA, and PPE and technology are $800,000 and $700,000. So trying to figure out to what extent will we have to continue to provide for COVID-related expenses is not easy. And what we've done is anticipated that for half of a year, maybe, if we had to, for the first half of the year, and that's why the expenses are lower. Some of the stuff is already on hand, and we wouldn't have to get it again anyway. And so you can see those numbers, but the bottom number is what I want to draw your attention to, and that is what we're referring to as recovery services. We're anticipating our students having fallen behind as a result of COVID and the models that we've had in place. The teachers are obviously doing their best to keep providing curriculum. We heard them when they came here and explained what was happening. But we do anticipate and want to provide some recovery services. So we've put $1 million in there, and we anticipate, we certainly are hopeful that we'll continue to get some federal funding, but there will be some grants we believe will be available as well that could help in that regard as well. So.
Yeah, and included in that, we could end up with some compensatory services in special education, academic reinforcement or recovery there. I think more importantly, though, too, we need to think about things like the fine arts and band. And I know we spent money this year to have tents, to have those types of things outside. And some of the restrictions have been more restrictive. As you know, we are playing sports, but there have been some restrictions on some of those other activities and programs that are vital for our kids. So it's a wide range of COVID-related one-time expenses that we put that in there for if we, as part of the budget.
Yeah, just to emphasize, this is not part of our operating budget. In working with the town manager, these are outside of the operating budget. They're considered one-time expenses, and so are not counted towards our operating budget.
So this 2.6 is not factored in our, I'm sorry, I lost my page here.
That's correct.
In the 54.
That's correct.
Okay.
And neither is the $4.7 million counted in the 52
this year.
Right?
Correct. Okay.
Yep.
All right, next slide.
So, sorry, quick question. So is this money, this 2.6, let's just assume that we are hopefully back to normal, as best as normal can be in the fall, 5 days in person, all 5 days. Is this 2.6 still on the table, or does that go away?
So that would depend on what the COVID needs are, and if they are, we have COVID needs and there is grant stimulus money, those types of one-time funds that would work with the town because they were not budgeted. We would look to use that and do those things to supplement and make those things happen. We have plans with our current grants and our different components of Ms. Marks had applied for a grant this year to do some recovery during April vacation, for example. So we'll continue to pursue all those typical avenues that we have within the operating budget, but these would be unbudgeted or separate from the budget based on need, depending on the COVID situation.
Right. Just one thing I want to make clear is that we're not setting aside $2.6 million. We are trying to estimate what they could possibly be as far as COVID expenses go, and the town manager has indicated she's going to support us in whatever they are. So if it ends up going the whole year, it could be more than this, and she understands that, and we would get those funds. If, for instance, in your scenario, which would be the best case scenario, is we don't have to deal much with, PPE and
right.
OLA and those things, but we find that recovery services require more than $1 million, then those funds could be utilized for that purpose instead of, some of these other things.
And where does this money come from?
That's always nice.
So it would be, I'm not going to commit to what the town manager, where they're going to come from, but I would anticipate finance committee reserve funds or free cash. They're one-time expenses, so there are those kind of options to provide.
And we would hope the federal government and the state government would be kicking in for some of this.
Right, anything provided by, made available, such as the CARES Act money this year, or the grant that we got specific to schools this year, would offset any of these expenses.
Well, it offsets them for the town.
For both. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And we've been lucky to have, it's been a good collaborative relationship. Dr. Mealy, next slide.
All set.
Okay. So as many of you already know, we took steps last year in the FY21 budget to address critical areas for improvement and created a comprehensive multi-year plan. The FY22 budget, recommended budget, maintains our pre-COVID level of educational operational services, and it's designed for not only this year but beyond. So it's critical that the needs that we'll address next are done so in conjunction with the capacity and space needs that will be met as part of Facilities Master Plan Phase 2. And therefore, we've adjusted our 5-year plan now to a 7-year plan of identified needs. So when we talk about one of the big components of our buildings is class size, and we'll continue to work on class size as identified needs so that we can address space constraints as part of those Facility Master Plan Phase 2. And class size reduction, it really impacts teaching and learning and enables us to better meet the needs of all of our students. Elementary specialists, as we've added more elementary teachers and as we continue to make progress on elementary class size, elementary specialists in terms of art, music, PE, those positions are really critical so that we can, not only teach the kids, but also meet contractual obligations as well. Next up, special education programs and teachers. Ms. Marks.
Can I ask you a question real quickly? When did we decide to go to a 7-year plan from a 5-year plan?
We're going to explain that.
We're going to explain.
Okay.
Ms.
Would you like me
Marks?
to go ahead?
Yes.
Okay. Special education teachers, we continue to see an increase in the number of students with significant special needs. I know we are starting to see a lot of initial evaluation requests, and I'm sure some of that has to do with the pandemic, COVID, the situation that we've been in. Last year, Marcy and I started to really work on a timeline of sorts, like who our students are from pre-K up through 12, what their needs are, how many students are grouped in programs. That's partially the result, the middle school program that we did fund this year in the budget for students with significant needs was part of that evaluation. So we'll continue to do that. And that may result in the need for more teachers or more programs or different types of programming. English, you want me to keep going?
English learners, Ms. Marks, you're right up your alley.
English learners. So we really want to be sure that we are making, providing every resource for our English learner students so that they can make effective academic progress. We've been working on changing some of our teaching practices, evaluating our current curriculum and updating that to meet the needs of those students. We do have we've always had primarily tutors with the exception of one EL teacher. That person retired last year. We did replace her with another EL teacher, and we were able to hire an EL teacher at our ABEC program. And the 2 teachers are currently at Atkinson and ABEC, which is where we have the highest number of English learners right now. So that's something that we need to do in order to meet state regulations as well. There are a lot of new regulations around English learners. Social workers, obviously we have, especially given the current situation, there are a lot of mental health issues that arise. They are increasing, and it's a bigger concern now. So we are looking to provide social workers in the schools to help with that. Reading teachers, you know that I think it was back when I was a principal, so it's been a number of years now. We cut reading teachers, so not every one of our elementary schools has a full-time reading teacher. We have 2 schools that have a full-time Title I reading teacher and a part-time reading teacher as well. But we really need full-time reading teachers back in our elementary schools. All of our reading teachers are participating in professional development after school today. We are doing a study on a lot of new research around the science of reading and how to adjust our instruction. Tomorrow we have all of our primary teachers, our EL teachers, our special education teachers, and our reading teachers taking part in professional development on the Heggerty Phonemic Awareness System, which is something we are adding to our curriculum. And we really want to make sure that we are addressing students' literacy needs, both in core instruction, Tier 1, whole class instruction, as well as with our reading interventionists to prevent reading disabilities and reading issues. Kids not reading is it is a struggle for them, and it impacts them lifelong. So it's something we're very serious about. I think someone else has registrar.
Dr. Mealy?
Yeah, that one's me. The benefits that we identified from this position to kind of centralize registration. A lot of times when families are coming into North Andover, they have children in more than one level. So it's nice to have one place you can go, but also the significance is that that person can then be their connection to the district and monitor their transition into the district. And if there's a language barrier, somebody who can help with that. So we thought it was really important for this position in order to help parents transition smoothly and have their students get a running start when they come into North Andover.
Library media specialist. So we've made some progress from when I first came here and the library doors were locked at the elementary schools to 1 librarian to now we have 3. So part-time in all of our elementary schools. Important to note that our librarians are not just checking out books. They are really partners in literacy instruction and other content area curriculum. They are fabulous, fabulous resources. They also help teach technology integration. So in this district, we have our tech people, but that's really around the hardware and the infrastructure. They are not technology integration people, really helping students to know how to use our technology and also supporting teachers in how to use the instructional technology, not just how to turn on that Chromebook. So we really need to increase that support in our buildings, our elementary buildings. And just a shout out while I'm talking about this, we have a fabulous middle school and high school librarian, and our high school librarian, Laura Harrington, was nominated to the Northeast Massachusetts School Library Association's group as a co-director. So that's quite an honor. So we're very proud of her, but they're a fabulous group.
Okay. Enrichment programming, as you know, I mean, we have wonderful programming here after school. In community programs, I think that anyone who sees kids after school heading up to the youth center, remarkable things happening. And this modest amount of money that we had put in for enrichment, for the creation of enrichment opportunities for high school students to ensure that we're meeting their academic and social and emotional needs, including a wide range of students. So we're looking to do something after school with students that typically don't have a place to go or activities to do, and they were hanging around trying to get into the gym, and we're looking to use this enrichment money to meet some of those needs, both academically, social, emotional, and learning-wise. And we were even thinking about like a supper to go or a dinner to go. So you'll see that in the budget. Administrative leadership support, as you know, we have, and you'll see in the 7-year plan, that we put in assistant principals at the elementary. We have large elementary schools, and this gives them the ability for the principals to do more things around supervision and evaluation of teachers, and just overall better support our students, communication with parents. And last year, we did not fill that position in the FY21 budget, and we actually made a change that we had an assistant principal at the Franklin, and we had one at the Sargent, And we made a move to, with the Sergeant being the largest school, and Franklin and Atkinson with similar numbers. Atkinson had a need there, so the assistant principal is half-time over at the Atkinson and half-time at the Sergeant. So that is the administrative leadership support. And then special education leadership support. We talked about within this budget the position of assistant director in special education. And it's really something that could do many things in terms of the tasks and the requirements for special education to service students on IEPs. And particularly now in a pandemic and some of the compensatory services that are going to be owed, testing, all of those types of things. So we have that going in at a certain point, and we think that there's a really great opportunity to do multiple things, including summer school with that. And then Dr. Mealy, custodial support.
Yeah, actually, we skipped out-of-district tuition funding.
Oh, sorry
so I'll
about
do
that,
that
Jim.
one as well. Back when we had the Special Education Stabilization Fund made available to us, that was huge for us. But we had also committed at that time that we would include in our budget each year some amount over what we anticipated our out-of-district spending to be. We have a pretty good handle each year going in on what we're going to start the next year with, and that can change as we've all seen. But $130,000 is what we have recommended last year and going forward, and that comes out to about a 3% contingency. So the first unanticipated expenses that occur up to $130,000, we would have built into our budget. And then anything after that is when we would request to access the stabilization fund. So that's where that money goes. And then the custodial support, the reason that's in there, since I've been here, and even well before that, we are really lean in a lot of things, including custodial support. And that really has been driven home with what we're asking them to do during a pandemic. So we do need to supplement our custodial workforce.
All right. So, Dr. Mealy, do you want to just explain the colors, and then I'll start out with the
Yeah.
positions?
Based on Mr. Teresi's question, I feel like we may have buried the lead.
You skipped right over it.
So what we're going to explain is, and there are two driving factors for extending it from a 5-year to a 7-year. One being the pandemic and the fact that revenues are impacted, and we're not sure yet what that impact is, but we certainly hope that the reserves we've built up over the years are going to carry us through this coming year, and then we get out of it, and we have Amazon coming on and other things happening that we can start to make some progress. But the other part
Can I ask a
is,
quick question though on that? Do
Sure.
you think that's our responsibility right there?
which part?
I mean, you just made a statement that we're going from a 5-year to a 7-year plan because of a possible, not definite, a possible loss of revenue. Do you think that's our job here, or do you think that's the FinCom and the Selectmen's job?
Well, I think it's important to hear the second reason before
Okay, I'm
we
sorry.
decide
Yeah.
that. And I just think that because we're tying everything to the facilities master plan, and really what we've been working with the town manager on is a commitment to this plan. And that and one of the things we really pointed out is, and we do have a bullet about this, but we can't rely on the annual percentage increase to make this plan happen, because we run into this battle. We get into this battle every year, and there's not enough. There's not enough to do what you want to do. So,
But that's what you say though, but that's not the truth.
what do you mean?
There's plenty of revenue this town gets in that can afford the 4.5% increase.
Well, that,
So
right, okay. So, and that's what what I'm saying, though,
Okay.
is that we're looking for a commitment outside of that normal discussion we have to commit to, however it's going to happen, funding this 7-year plan. And so the reason we've extended it for 7 years is we've got 4 projects that are anticipated to be part of Facilities Master Plan Phase 2. And given the timeline of that, which looks like it'll come on, the first project would be FY24, then 25, 26, and 27, we need these increases in our operating budget to coincide with more capacity and more ability to provide services and the ability to put them someplace in our schools. And so that's why we've moved it out to the 7 years.
Well, much like in the 5-year plan, you know, as we saw, we put, you know, in last year's FY21 plan, we had a placeholder in the 5-year plan for the middle school. I think it was $900,000 in that plan, or 15 teachers to make that impact. But we have to have that space. So we're identified the needs that will drive what kind of spaces we create. So the best places for teachers to teach and kids to learn. And I think that plays a big role in it. And along with the town's master plan, but the facilities master plan too.
Yeah, and one of the challenges is the middle school that Dr. Gilligan just mentioned is a good example. We have it in year 6, but we don't know when that one comes online. Maybe it's the first, maybe it's the, the 4th year of this master plan. But right now, as a placeholder, we have it in year 6. As far as what you're looking at, when you look at this, anything in red is something that was going to be planned for that year, but we're now pushing it out. So, as an example, assistant principal, Dr. Gilligan mentioned, we were going to start that this year and then next year, but we're going to push that out into year 3 and do a half every 3 years, or one each of the 3 years. Anything in green is something we did do, we were planning on doing and did do it. And then in the black is anything that has been, that's where it's now planned to be done or was originally planned to be done anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So at the box, 3rd row over, second, 3rd from the bottom, high school teachers, were we budgeting 420 and are now hoping for 310?
That one,
So we're going to explain that in a minute.
I bolded that just because that one's a little different than all of the others. Yep.
All right, we're gonna get to that, Mr. McDevitt. All right, so we had the assistant, in the 5-year plan, the FY21 plan, we had the assistant special education director exactly where it is in FY23. Same with the custodian. We've bumped out with the 2.5 level services budget this year, the parent liaison registrar to FY23. As many know, we had one team at the middle school that did not have a 4-person team, and in order to best service kids and tied into special education as well services, we filled that position last year. Dr. Mealy, you want to talk about the $180,000 and how that plays in?
Yeah, and
Can I just interrupt for a second?
Mhm.
It would be helpful to me, like, I don't know, when you're talking about things, I don't know where on this chart you are. So it would be helpful to me, Dr. Mealy, if you could put a cursor on what it is that we're talking about, like the 6th grade team with 3 teachers, I think, is in, as it, in battleship terms, grade 6, year 1, $60,000. I think that's where Dr. Gilligan was talking about that at one point. So if you can point to the box that you're talking about when you're talking, or when Dr. Gilligan's talking, that would help orient me. I don't know if it helps the people in the room. I don't know if it's big enough for you.
Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay,
It
good.
just disappeared. Okay. And one other thing I want to point out is the town manager has asked us to include the OPEB liability, which was determined to be $6,000 per position. So you'll see the numbers have increased from $50,000 for the assistant principal to $56,000, and from $100,000 for the assistant SPED director, special education director, to $106,000, and so on. So you see that throughout. That's why the numbers are different. And then my cursor. Okay.
Jim, do you know how many school districts do that? Like,
I have no
care
idea.
about OPEB?
I have no idea how many care about it that much or set aside funds for that.
That'd be an interesting question to know. Maybe
I
the
can do
town
my
manager.
listserv. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so my cursor keeps going in and out, but the column, the row that is elementary teachers, you see 180,000 in the second column, and it's bold. That was originally planned for the first year, but we did not fill those positions. We filled about half of the positions we had planned, and the other half we left just trying to see what we needed to get through the year. So what we're proposing is taking the 180,000 that is unfilled positions, but still in our budget, and the 130 that was set aside for the special education contingency, and adding those two together for the 310,000 that you see in the high school. Originally, we had 420, anticipating the need for 7 new teachers to implement the salary schedule, I was gonna say, the change in the high school schedule, which Dr. Gilligan's gonna talk about now.
So Helen, if you see the 3 up from the bottom, the high school teachers, that's where we had originally had the $420,000. And that is where, using money from the budget last year at the 4.52%, in that unfilled positions, that's where we, as part of our original 5-year plan, we intended to add up to 7 high school teachers in FY22 in anticipation of schedule recommendations from the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, to reduce class size and to expand opportunities for college prep and advanced placement classes. In December, I know Principal Jackson was in here. We had a lot of folks in here at that meeting. NEASC, during that presentation, had confirmed what we had anticipated and made the following recommendations: to examine the existing trimester schedule in order to provide opportunities for continuous student learning, and to re-examine the trimester schedule and length of classes to ensure optimal access to courses for all high school students. So right now, and this has been going on probably just in about every budget going back, is been some type of talk about waiting for the NEASC report and examining the high school schedule, particularly looking at the trimester schedule. So right now, we have a team that's starting to take a look and has been looking at examining the trimester schedule. This will be a process that will include faculty, student and parent feedback, and we anticipate that any proposed changes to the schedule will come to the school committee in late March for next year. And at this time, we anticipate using that funding to add 5 teachers at the high school in order to implement the changes necessary to maximize opportunities for our high school students. And again, we will fund these positions utilizing the funds from the unfilled positions in the FY21 budget, as well as the money that we put aside in a reserve in the out-of-district contingency fund, which we later put back in the plan
In the third year.
in the 3rd year.
So basically, what you're saying in that box where it's 420 and then 310 is the 420 is deleted and the 310 is what we're going for now, and that represents 5 high school teachers, 3 of which we already had kind of gotten in our budget in 21 but had to set aside because of the MOU.
Hadn't filled, correct?
Okay. And so then you're adding 2 more. So it's basically 3 in 21, 2 in 22.
Correct.
And it adds up to
Correct.
5. Okay.
That's absolutely correct.
At the risk of hurting anybody's feelings, that would be helpful to actually maybe represent it that way instead. Maybe
Yep.
put the red in the 21 for the 3, and then put the, I don't know how you do it.
I know,
but it's a little confusing.
it is, and we've tried it a few different ways and settled on this one, but we can certainly try something.
So basically, we had already, gotten the go-ahead for the 3 this year, but we had to hold because of this insanity, and now we're adding 2. We're gonna do all 5 in 22 is what we're proposing. Thank you.
Correct.
Yep. And we had, the 420 represents what we had put in the original plan in FY21.
Thank you.
And the elementary teachers that we did not hire in FY22 are no longer needed in FY21. We didn't hire them, and in FY22, we no longer anticipate needing them.
We've continued to make significant progress, as you know, in reducing class size at the elementary schools. And when we look at the projections for next year, with the staffing that we have, we believe we can maintain and keep that with the enrollment that's coming up, as well as make some shifts within if we have to across. We have bubble classes oftentimes in a school where there's a 5th grade teacher, because there's a odd number that year, enrollment spikes, and it's not uncommon for us to shift and move folks around to meet those needs.
And it's also a space issue, other than Sergeant. Sergeant, we have a little space, but other than that, we don't.
Could we be clear, though, the MOU has no bearing on this, right? The MOU never came into effect. The revenues never got below that. You just decided not to fill these positions. The revenues were
right.
there.
Well, we didn't fill them because we didn't know if, you're right, the MOU has not had to take effect.
Right, exactly. So the MOU is
But we
irrelevant.
didn't fill them anticipating that that might not be the case.
Well, okay.
But, so we've already got the okay for the 3 that we just didn't fill, and now we're gonna fill 5
They're in our
next
budget.
year.
It's not the okay, it's like the money was there, we just didn't use the money.
We
Right,
did not
that's,
use
well,
it.
that's what I mean by the okay.
You know, and part of that was,
I'm understanding that the MOU said that we couldn't spend the money before September 1st. So
No.
that was a little
No,
tricky.
it was for positions that were critical, or required, mandated. Mandates,
Okay.
yep.
yeah, so, you know, if you go down, Helen, to where it says middle school teachers, you know, we have them projected out, as you'll see. We had them projected in year 5 of the FY21 plan, and they're bumped out to year 6, FY26, because all of that's contingent on what happens with the facilities master plan and the projects as they develop. But to Helen's point, the bottom left, Helen, first column at the bottom, the middle school special education program. You know, that was a position that we had to fill, that we needed and was absolutely, these are all were necessary, and we identified them as critical. But that's one at the time that we filled special education because we had to.
Well, it was cost saving, right? If we didn't fill it, we were gonna
But we had kids
spend more.
coming in that had to be, that's what.
Students had to be serviced, and they deserved to be serviced, you know, at the North Andover Middle School, and it was something we could do, and it just happened to provide a significant cost saving as well. So,
Dr. Gilligan, you said earlier a specialist was something we're contractually obligated to provide more of. Why is that not until year 4 then?
we have added specialists in, and when we look at the original, let me just go back here.
Just while you're looking, when we are adding staff, that's what he means by contracted, because we have to provide a certain amount of coverage, whether it's for prep time. So the more staff we add, that we need to add specialists, and that's why you can move it out, because we're not adding the staff.
Okay, so I thought we were like in breach of the contract now, but
Nope.
it's only when we add the staff, we're gonna have
Exactly.
to add specialists with them.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we've had to add in the last couple of years, is we've continued to decrease class size at elementary. That's where the specialists have come into.
Right.
And, you know, in last year's a couple budgets ago, we talked about how we were doubling up some of the smaller classes, and that's where we've added them in. All right. At the top, we hired that position that was in the original plan for FY21 at the Brad Street Early Childhood Education Special Education Program last year. We hired a high school special education teacher last year. Special education teachers additional as a need was in FY22 and has been bumped out to FY23. To Dr. Mealy's point of why is it 132 and before it was 120? That's because we've added in the OPEB liability. Out of district tuition, you know, we had that in last year, and as Dr. Mealy explained, that's giving us the ability to put the teachers at the high school to meet the needs for this upcoming year.
And we did have the conversation with the town manager, who understands that we would not then have that cushion prior to needing to access the stabilization fund.
Yep.
Yep.
So for me, that analogy is this 130, the green 130 in this current year 21 is.
We have it right now,
Right,
and it's in the budget for level services, but we're
Yes.
gonna use it for the positions
next year.
next year. And so we would have to, if we have unanticipated expenses, we wouldn't have a contingency. We would have to access
Right.
the stabilization fund.
Right, so what's similar to that, though, is that it's in and you're using it for something different this one time, the very same way we kind of did that as we planned for the Ann Bradstreet kids, our teachers. I remember
They
for
were
a couple
there,
of years, you
and
put
then we didn't have
placeholders
to
and
add
didn't
them,
use them.
correct.
Yeah, so
Right.
that's, I think, a helpful analogy for that.
Dr. Mealy, the nurses?
Oh, so, yeah, Cheryl Barzak does a tremendous job of finding grants that are available, and she's done so and has been able to add nursing staff to support our existing nursing staff through grants. So we've taken it out of here. If for some reason they do go away, which does happen with grants, then we would have to revisit and bring them back into the operating.
And then you'll see, we did use the funds for EL, English learners, and FY21. We had one for FY22, and we've bumped those positions to FY23 and FY24. Social workers, we had one in FY22, and we've bumped those out, along with reading, bumping those out. The library media specialists are staying where they are, and the enrichment programming, we're bumped out to FY23.
So other than the high school teachers, we're not adding anything this year
Well,
in FY22.
yeah, so being at a 2.5% increase, I guess every year in North Andover, it's, you know, it's like a clock that has perfect time. We're typically always at 3% for level services. It's been that way, Jim, I don't know, Dr. Neely, at least a decade.
Yep.
And I think one of the things to celebrate is the work that the school committee did, working with the association to negotiate a contract this year, because we anticipated, based on information from the town side, that this may be a tougher year, a lower COLA, percentage increase. And what that has done is, it has made level services for the schools this year 2.5%. So what we, you know, being level services is bringing what we had from last year into the following year. And we wanted to find ways within this budget to meet needs.
So this slide here shows what the percentage increases will be, or what the needs are to provide these initiatives. What I've done is shown what the operating budget will be each year, based on 3% for level services, and then adding in these initiatives that we've identified. If I had put in onto year one, we came into this year with a 4.52% increase. Year two would then be the 2.5% that we're recommending for this coming year. And then you can see the initiatives are $848,000 in year three, $1 million in year four, $630,000 in year five, and then the $990,000 for the middle school in year six. And again, these can change, be later or sooner depending on the schedule. But the percentage increases, where we originally had 4.5% over 5 years each year, we have the 4.5, then 2.5, and then 4.56, 4.76, 4.06, and 4.6. And then because we don't have anything yet in year 7, although things could get bumped out to there, that's back on track of a 3% increase to continue what we have.
I need to understand how these numbers move along. So I see in FY22, the total towards the bottom is 54,316, 613.
Right.
And then if we go to the top of year 3,
That moves to the top of, right, that moves to the top of year 3 to start the discussion, and then you add 3% to that, and that gives you the level services. That's the 1.6 million.
Yep.
And then you add the initiatives that we've identified in the prior slides of 848,000. So that gets you to 56,794 for that year, which is a 4.5% increase. And then that number should be the one that moves over, but for some reason it's...
But it doesn't, and it doesn't do that also in fiscal year 25, and it doesn't do
I
that
see that.
in 26 or 27.
I gotta run that again. Yep.
I mean, Excel's a big monster. So we just need to make sure that our bottom lines are correct.
Yep.
Thank you.
And all the stuff in black on the preceding pages where we have the different, that's what rolls up to make these.
Correct.
Right. But that, in all honesty, that's a shell game of just moving stuff
Right.
further along, because we're not doing anything this year.
Right,
Okay.
understood.
All right.
Yep. So as far as this year's budget, the impact, we start with a budget of $52,991,000. The cost of level services would be $1,324,000 for a total proposed budget of $54,316,613, which is 2.5%.
Out of that 52,991, do we spend all that money? Are we going to spend all that money?
The challenge is
We didn't hire all those teachers and
we
stuff.
didn't, but we also have run out of CARES Act money and the grant. We have spent all that. It's unfortunate, well, it's not unfortunate because we would have spent it anyway. They had told us that we had to spend that money by December 31st, both the CARES Act and the grant. And then late in December, maybe a week before, we were told, oh, well, they're extending it. But it doesn't matter, it's the same amount of money anyway. So we're still providing OLA and we're still getting hand sanitizer and wipes and all that from now until the end of this fiscal year. And that has to come from somewhere, so it will come from a combination of our budget and reserves from the MOU. So we'll see how much of our budget is used for that. My best guess right now is we will not spend all of the 52,991, that we will have some reserve to end the year that we can use to prepay, which is what we do when we have money left over.
Next slide, Dr. Mealy.
Yep.
So the 2.5% provides for the level services, and that is consistent with the projections based
The
on,
projections from the town.
yes,
Not your projections.
no,
The
projections.
the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee.
Yep.
Which Dr. Gilly and I are a part of.
And the second part is, we've identified possible COVID-related expenses for FY '22 that will be funded as one-time expenses, because that would not be built in, and they, as Dr. Mealy explained that earlier, those costs will arise. And then it adjusts the 5-year plan to a 7-year plan to account for the impact of the pandemic. But more importantly, I think it coincides more with the building projects, which we're simply running out of space in a lot of these places to put people. So as part of Facilities Master Plan 2, these renovations, the additional space is critical. And it really represents our best thinking over 30 years, over 7 years, how we're going to address these needs with these programs coming online. And then I really think, and I've thought about this a lot, now more than ever, it's imperative that we work together as a community to ensure our students are provided the best possible education. It's become clear to me that we cannot do so by relying on our annual budget increases to meet these needs. We continue to fall behind the rest of the state in per pupil spending as a result of only relying on these annual percentage increases to fund our schools. So I think we need a commitment from the school committee, the select board, the finance committee, the town manager, the superintendent, to work together so that we can fund the long-term needs of our students as they've been identified over this plan with the other projects coming online.
You beat me.
Comments?
So we've been asking questions along the way, but probably good to go through a formal go-round. And I would start with Mr. Teresi.
Really?
Amy raised her hand.
Amy, go ahead.
I couldn't see any hands raised. I'm sorry, I can't see the room.
That's fine. Amy, go ahead. You were eager.
No, so a couple things. Thank you for all this work, by the way. Back when you talked about the possible COVID-related expenses for fiscal year '22, and I know we talked about that's one-time expenses. The line, the recovery services that you talked about, we don't know yet, but there's obviously a concern that might go beyond '22, right? It's going to take time to recover, depending on how students are doing, and maybe only certain students will need more time to recover. It all depends. Do we need to accommodate for that now going forward in your long 7-year plan, or is that because it's a one-time expense, you have to ask for that one-time expense each year? And also in terms of OLA, you know, should there be a situation where, you know, we suddenly want to offer a different type of education, do we need to look at what it would take, and if we're even interested in doing OLA down the road? Is that part of the discussions you're all having? Probably not with your space discussion, but those two things, do we need to look at those not just as one-time expenses, but as part of a cost of offering education?
So that's a great question. So, you know, this budget is based on the assumption of a full return to regular schedule for all students and staff in FY22. But as we've navigated this pandemic, I can certainly tell you it's anything but certain, and it remains unclear whether we will, as a district, incur these COVID-related expenses next year, Amy.
But I'm saying even if we all go, like, and I think Andrew, he asked that at the beginning, I don't think we really got the answer.
Well, I mean, that's why I wanted to just if I can
I'm sorry, yep.
get to it. So these expenses would have to be budgeted separately, and they'd require additional resources to address. So they would have to come. So that's the conversation that we've had with the town manager, talking about, because, you know, some districts are saying, what they're saying is these would be unbudgeted or requests that would have to come from somewhere. If we have the need and there's a COVID need, whether we get additional stimulus or federal money, our kids will have need, and this, you know, this would have to be budgeted separately. It would require additional resources to address, and these would be one-time funds. And I think it would be funded from probably a combination of things, from the town side, from other funds, whether it's stimulus or whether it's from the government or from the state or from those places. But those needs would be separately budgeted.
I think the answers are different to both your questions. I think right now our thinking is that if the need for recovery services extended beyond this coming year, that there's still one-time expenses. Okay. The second part where you asked about OLA and possibly, we haven't discussed the possibility of that, but if we were going to, continue that beyond, because it made sense for some people continuing, then I think that would be something that would have to be added in at that point. Right. Yep.
And I guess that's very helpful, yes. But I guess the recovery services, at what point does something like that, if it has to go long-term, stop being labeled as COVID, and it's just like we have
we could find, right, and I think that in addition to providing the services, there will be an ability to assess as well this coming year. And so that assessment will inform us as to, do we need to put something in the budget on a regular basis instead of just these one-time expenses?
Because I think and this is back to what Andrew had asked earlier, if we all were back in school in September, full in person, back to normal, maybe some of these things would go away, but recovery services would not, and a couple of things would not. So, you know, this page is pretty important, no matter what format we have. Maybe not all the elements of it, but there are certainly elements of it. There will be one-time expenses that have to be agreed to upfront by everybody in the budget, aside from the 2.5% increase of level services.
Right. And it's important to know that these aren't written in stone. I was trying to stress that earlier. It's understood that they could be more, they could be less. So.
Correct, okay.
Yep.
I'll stop there, thanks. I'll let someone else ask some questions.
Do you want to go?
You probably want to go Friday.
Maybe not. All right, so I've got a couple of notes here, a couple of thoughts. First, I mean, again, for anybody who's watching at home who isn't aware, who doesn't know and understand, and I think Dr. Gilligan said it, and I think we've said it a number of times, we are in the bottom 25, not towns, not percentages, of 25 out of 300 and something towns, municipalities, and cities in the state for per pupil funding. The bottom 25.
Yeah, we were 313 at 323 last year. We've inched up a little bit this year.
Still low.
Go us. Okay. So there we go. So the 7-year plan that's here, and I said it earlier, and I mean it, it's just a shell game of us moving everything further back. when I started to look through this earlier today, I was kind of looking for what we always get of, here's the detail of what's changing next year, right? What's happening, where are we going? And I couldn't find it. And I kept struggling through it, and I finally think I figured it out earlier today, and I think you guys just confirmed it. There are 0 initiatives that are going into play for next year, because everything that's happening is 2.5, and we're just talking level services, ideally not level as what we're doing today, but what we would have budgeted and provided for today, we would do for next year.
That's
that
true, with
correct?
the exception of the high school.
The exception of the high school, so there will be, I think, what was it, 5
Five.
teachers?
Yes.
5 potential teachers that are coming in there. When I look, I've just got a lot of thoughts. So when I look at the recovery plan, or the recovery services and the possible COVID expenses, to me, there's not a guarantee of that coming in, despite the fact that it's here and it's on paper. That $1 million for recovery services, I don't know what the plan for that is, but there has to be some level of additional support for students and teachers, most specifically at the elementary level. That is the foundation for everything. As you know, Dr. Gilligan, having been an elementary school principal, for these students, some of them have not been in school. By the time we come back, it'll be 18 months. We are going to have huge levels of ranges of learning at, how they're reading at a 3rd grade level, at a 1st grade level, all over the place. There has to be a concentrated effort for that. This $1 million that's here, I don't even know if that's enough to cover it, but from my perspective, that's not even guaranteed to be in here. So this right now is, there's no other way to say it. This is awful. This is 2.5. It is, I'm a no on this budget right now.
That's a good segue. I'm disappointed too. Dr. Gilligan, Dr. Milley, Ms. Marks. This budget, it just seems to me, and I'm sorry if it comes across way, but it seems like we capitulated already. I don't need to go into, because we had that tri-board meeting back in December, and I kind of said my piece a little bit there. It wasn't really a good meeting because there was like 20 people on the call and stuff, but year after year, the town underestimates revenues and overstates expenses every single year. And what happens? We have extra money. That's why we have all this surplus. That's why we have all this free cash. And they say, well, free cash, it's a one-time revenue source. It's not a one-time revenue source if every single year we're putting more money into free cash. I really just don't even want to go through this budget right now. I want to say, go back, start again, and give me something with 4.5%. Because that's what the town can afford. She can say we're not going to get that kind of revenue in. Let us have that fight with the FinCom and the selectmen. And if we don't settle it amongst the 3 boards, then we'll go to town meeting and settle it. The money is there. It's been there year after year after year. And Andrew's right. We can hope in 7 years we get there, but there's nothing that's going to bind this board, the FinCom, the selectmen, even town meeting. There's nothing to bind us from sticking to that 7-year plan. Even the 5-year plan you guys came up with last year, which you guys put a lot of time and effort into. We bought into it. We could tell we're going to get there, and there's some large increases every single year. But to get 2.5 on the 52, I don't have my glasses here, I'm sorry. About $53 million, especially when we didn't even spend the $53 million on the things that we were supposed to spend it on, it's just so disappointing. And, you know, I apologize if I'm directing, you know, I know you want to work with the town manager and have that relationship, and you need to have that relationship. It's important. But we're a policy setting board, the selectmen are a policy setting board. We need to fight for the schools. We need to fight for the students. And this isn't enough. We don't know what we're going to expect, you know, when our kids come back, hopefully full-time and maybe sooner than September, who knows? But we're going to need more money, and the money's there. You know, I don't want to misquote what I heard on the tri-board meeting, but, you know, she's talking about using like half of the free cash on the fire station, on a new fire station. Like, that's our priority right now? Like, renovating that fire station? I'll take that fight to town meeting all day long. That's what every single year we just create surpluses. You know, we get the fancy awards and, you know, a new set of steak knives and stuff. You know, it's great. It looks great on our website. Fantastic. But our kids are falling behind every year. So, respectfully, we're just kicking the can down the road here. I just want to see us come back with a new budget, because the granular detail, that's your ball game, Dr. Gilligan. I'm not going to tell you where the money's to be spent, but we need to have more money for the schools. And, you know, my calculation, and I know Jim will probably have the tip of his tongue, but, you know, a 4.5% increase is $1 million more, I believe. But I mean, that's what I want to see. I want to see a budget, FY22 budget, with a 4.5% increase, which is another $1 million. How we're going to spend it? That's what I want to see.
I have a question on that $1 million recovery. Does that include support for the special ed students too, or is that just gen ed? Or is it everybody?
In terms of the 2.6 million,
The million recovery.
oh, the million in the recovery.
Yep.
Yeah, so those in that column, the $1 million is in there to meet the needs of whatever those needs are, COVID-wise. And that's why it didn't say unbudgeted, it would have to be separately budgeted. So I do agree, Mr. McDevitt, that the reading pieces, that is one of the early literacy is one of the most absolute critical components to that. And that's why in this budget, I had really said, not unbudgeted, but it would have to be separately budgeted for us to meet these needs.
And not the only advocate, but probably the first advocate for the need for recovery services has been Marcy, talking about. So, yes.
So that $1 million is a pot for everybody.
But again, that's just, right now, it's a placeholder number. It could be, everyone understands, it could be more, it could be less. But yes, it includes
Could be
special
less is
education.
the scary part, though.
Well, that's, you know, you have to say that, but,
Yep.
you know, we all anticipate it's probably gonna be more. And it,
So is the town committed if it's more?
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay, and
absolutely.
does that also?
But what does that mean? I'm sorry. What does that mean? They're committed. I mean, there's no. I mean, I apologize for cutting you off there, but
okay.
that's what it just fries me. That like they commit to this. What does that mean?
So, David, I would say this. I would say one of the reasons, you know,
I'm sorry.
they had these projections come in. There's the 2.5% is level services. I can tell you, I know what we have for free cash. I know what we have for these different components. And I know that this puts us at a 6%, you know, if you take the 4.5 and the 2.5 and we add it up, you know, that's one of our biggest increases over time. I understand that. But I also know, working with the town manager, talking about these COVID expenses, recovery expenses, all these different things, that these would have to be separately budgeted. I mean, the need is the need, and we are going to do everything we have to do to meet the needs of our kids. And, you know, I had originally probably had the word unbudgeted, because that's what a lot of districts have been saying is these are unbudgeted expenses, and we don't know how they're gonna come. And when I had that conversation with the town manager, we talked about a bigger plan. We talked about a plan that, you know, that's where we started the 5-year plan. We knew a lot of it was space dependent. The 5-year plan was absolutely space dependent. You know, we've had this year. I think, Jim, if it's 4.6 million in COVID-related expenses that we've had, you know, there's going to be COVID-related expenses for sure next year. So, you know, with the increase that we have and the town manager saying, no, not unbudgeted, it would have to be separately budgeted, and then folks buying into a bigger plan overall with these buildings coming online, is going to need support so that we can get the buildings or the additions built, and then operationally, with OPEB liability and everything else, put the teachers in there.
And just, I'll say this, that I pride myself that over the years I've been pretty good at projecting. We're in uncharted waters here. Trying to figure out what it could cost us next year is extremely difficult. And so the conversation has been, yeah, let's give it our best guess without even knowing what the needs are going to be, but understanding that whatever the number is, we need to provide it.
So does compensatory services also come out of that too?
Correct.
Right? And then what if and I have my doubts that we can catch all the kids up in just 1 year. So what do we do with
That's what I was getting at too,
the next year?
Yep. That was an excellent question.
Okay, and then at last year's budget meeting, you laid out the plan and you discussed these needs that were critical to put into place this year. So doesn't this kind of send the message, well, they weren't so critical if we're now, to Andrew's point, pushing them off for another year or two? I worry about that message, I guess.
Yeah, with the pandemic that hit us, and no one anticipated that, we definitely had to
I know, but we still have to put the kids first.
adjust.
Yeah, and I guess if you think that I'm not putting the kids first, or we as a team, I mean, that's why we do these jobs. That's why we have.
This isn't directed at you.
No,
You
I'm
know
saying that this could be more than $2.6 million in COVID-related expenses.
Right.
And there are gonna be COVID-related expenses, whether we have a regular return to school, or we have, a modified, or whatever, however we return, is how we return. And I would anticipate, not anticipate, I mean, we've had the conversations that these would have to be separately budgeted, and the town manager's willing to work with us as part of this bigger, larger plan to put those things in place for what we think kids need. And we'll never shirk that duty, because that's what our kids deserve. That's what we will do. Frankly, I think that we have the staff, we have the administrators and the folks to do all these things. And it's a challenge, not just here in North Andover, it's a challenge everywhere. And if we have COVID expenses, even if we're back at a regular return, there are gonna be COVID expenses. They're gonna be academic, they're gonna be social emotional. We're going to have to run some things over the summer. We got a grant for April vacation. And then more importantly, we could be back at a regular return, and we're gonna need masks, we're gonna need PPE, we're gonna need hand sanitizers or the wipes at a rate that a normal year wouldn't see. So that's the thought. This is part of a bigger plan with the picture, and I do believe that there will be COVID-related expenses that will be separate and have to be paid for as one-time expenses.
Because what we're really asking for is $57 million, but some of it's one-time expenses.
In total.
But it involves kicking things down the road.
So I have some comments and questions. I would clarify that when we're talking about, I'm sorry, I'm back and I can hear myself.
Helen, we can't hear you.
So I don't think it's me, if I'm getting feedback of myself. So it's hard to talk and hear myself echo back in my head. Can you hear me now?
You're cutting in and out.
Is there something North
That's
Andover?
good.
That's better. Don't move.
I think you're good now.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm still getting feedback. It seems like I'm distracted. It's because I'm echoing. So I just want to clarify the statement that we can't move forward with the vision with the annual percentage increases. And the predicate to that is based on the revenue projections. We're obviously going to have annual percentage increases in order to move the vision forward. But it can't be based solely on the revenue projections. There's got to be other sources of funding for our schools. It concerns me that in all these identified things, there's nothing about numeracy. We're addressing literacy over and over. We know that the pandemic has caused greater, I don't think we're supposed to use the term learning loss. I think we're supposed to use incomplete learning in mathematics than in reading. That our students are continuing to progress in reading more than they are progressing mathematically, and for all kinds of reasons. So it concerns me that we're not addressing numeracy either generally or specifically with regard to recovery. I wonder if we could have a breakout of the list of needs that we have based on what requires space and what does not require space. So adding 3 teams of middle school teachers is going to require space. It's going to require us to do something with Facilities Master Plan 2 or with MSBA. However, adding things such as social workers, library and media specialists, a registrar, custodial staff, those are not space dependent to my knowledge. So in our next read of this, in the next iteration of it, I think it would be helpful for us to have that so that if we are saying we need more than 2.5%, which is available with the current revenue projections from the town manager, that we're not just saying we need more because we need more. We're saying we need more, and here is where it would apply.
Well, Madam Chair, I think we said that last year. I think we mapped out how we were going to spend it every single year. My beef tonight is I feel like the budget you presented to us just said, okay, the town manager says we don't have the money for it, so we'll kick it out a few years. That's how this is coming across to me, and I've seen that, and just so people at home know, I mean, historically, healthcare insurance, big number for us. FY14, we budgeted almost $11.1 million. The actual was $10.5 million. FY15, they budgeted $9.85 million for that. Came in at 8.6. FY16, $10.2 million. Came in at 8.9, almost $9 million. I can go on and on and on. Every single year, they do the same thing. And that's why we have free cash. And that's why we're able to take the free cash and build a new fire station like she wants to do. We could borrow them. Money's cheap. We could borrow money to do that. So I think we should have a bigger budget and then take our fight to the next step, which would be FinCom and the Board of Selectmen. And if that doesn't work out, I'm willing to compromise. But just to say, well, we'll agree with you 2.5 right now, I'm not in on that.
Yeah, I would add this. I would add that, we're looking at a longer term plan to get buy-in, to get consensus, to get these projects done. It's going to require significant money operationally and for the additions. And we know that there'll be COVID expenses. It could be less than 2.6 million. It could be more than 2.6 million. And, we plan on using that money as needed for next year.
But that's
as separately budgeted.
That's why, as a town, though, I mean, this isn't just town money and school money. It's everyone's. It's all our money. So, if it comes to that, I mean, we have these reserves. We can tap into that, and now that might take a special town meeting. One thing I have, there's a lot of things I don't like about town meeting, but we really have one bite of the apple here. We're supposed to go to May and have a budget, and then we, that's our legislative body. That's how we appropriate money. But that's a long way off. That's May. To go right to 2.5, I think is a big mistake. I think we should have a budget that represents our values. And I love no one comes out and really says it. The big O word, the override word. you know? They say it in private and stuff, but I want to hear the Board of Selectmen say it. We know you need more money, we'll have to get over it. Well, say it publicly then. You know, because I'm tired of it, and I apologize again for cutting you off like that, but I've heard this commitment, we'll commit to that. You can't, I mean, listen, it's very doubtful I'm going to be running for re-election to be here, you know? I don't know what everyone else's future is going to hold, you know? Who knows if you guys are going to be here in 7 years, you know? I hope so. I hope the town will be served by you, but we can't, like, just pray that in 7 years this all comes to fruition. We've got to fight for today in FY22, and you know, I'm not doing just the fight, because we do have several months before town meeting to come to a consensus. But to start off like this, I think is just, you know, setting up the white flag right away.
I would like to see, and I talked about this earlier, but, and Mrs. Marks, and I'm going to apologize, it's Carol Arkham, and then I'm blanking on the other woman's name right now.
Kristen.
Yes. You know, what do we need at that elementary level, specifically at the elementary? I'm sure we need other support at the higher levels, but I mean, my God, if we just started at the elementary level to help those kids, year one, potentially year two, with where we are for some gaps. I mean, that $100,000, that $1 million that's there, great, but that needs to be in our budget. That needs to start next year. And if we don't have a plan, I don't think Dr. Gilligan can go to the town manager and say, oh, we just want to add in, you know, 1.3 or whatever it is. We need to know, what is it going to take to help catch these kids up, to kind of make sure that, you know, we can bring the class together. I mean, we're going to have kids at all different places on the charts here. If that's not in the budget as a starting point, and then that becomes part of level services moving forward. To quote Mrs. Teresi, not doctor. Congratulations, by the way.
Well, he is a doctor.
You do have a JD. You do have a JD. So, you know, that we're setting up the white flag.
Yeah.
already.
So, well, Andrew, I would say this. I would say that, you know, we have folks coming back to talk about where we are in assessments, what are the needs. And these are going to be COVID-related expenses.
But that needs to be in the budget. I get that they're coming in and they're going to present that, and that's too late. It's too late.
Because I do think we recognize that you don't know what you don't know, like Jim just kind of said, but you have some sense of, through whatever the elementary school teachers can tell you, where things are you know, struggling. And I'm sure it's the K to 1, the kids who lost out at the end of K last year and came into first grade and then on to second grade is probably a huge area, and then any other kids into third. Mm-hmm. I know you don't know everything now, but you have some, you know, inkling, and I think that's a place to start with specifics, and then add a multiplier maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think we may be saying the same thing at the end. I think that we're going to have costs as related to COVID and the recovery. How they're funded, you know, the most important thing is we meet that need. So if they're separately budgeted and they're one-time expenses and we have to go to the town for them, then we're going to ask the town for those one-time expenses.
But I think part of the ask is you'd have to break down the $1 million or the whatever it is.
Right.
and
It could be
say-
more.
Right, but
And if
but
it's
break
more,
it down.
let's know that. Why are we asking for $1 million if what we need is 2?
Because we don't know.
Because we don't know, because we have to do that. And we have to meet with those reading and math specialists
And that's,
to put that plan together, to put that into this budget, because 2.5 is not going to fly.
I just want to add, thank you, Helen, for bringing up the numeracy piece. Just before this, I was watching a DOE webinar on how the pandemic has affected learning loss, actually, and they did use that term. And then exactly what they were saying, what you were saying, Helen, the reading is pretty level as compared to last year because kids can read on their own. They're using language at home. But the math dropped off significantly, like 5 to 10 points per growth across the nation. And they were saying because math is cumulative and it builds, everything builds. If you miss out on decimals last March, guess what? And you don't get it now, you're not going to be able to move on to the next concept. So I think it's really critical. Thank you for bringing that up, that we address the math.
And I just wanted to say that is in our conversations When we had that recovery money there, we didn't specify what it was, but math is not being ignored.
Oh, good. Okay.
Just-
Nope.
Thank you.
And we have folks coming in to present, scheduled at upcoming meetings. And I think this is,
But that's at the same time as this budget.
Right.
so.
yep.
Right.
Well, we
So-
certainly can take any direction. I mean,
from the board and say that I think we do need to look at this as one-time money and not as part of the operational expenses. And what I feel like we need is a way to understand that commitment. We know how to get a commitment to the operational budget. That's all very clear. But commitment to one-time money is less clear to me. So for me, it may be helpful to know how it is that we have that commitment from the town manager to cover the COVID expenses that may continue in fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23.
yeah, we're happy to have that conversation, and that's the conversation we had. Dr. Mealy and I had the other day about these separate budgeted pieces, and we fully anticipate that we will need those positions. And we know where a lot of our need is. We absolutely know, and Ms. Marks and the team have been doing assessments, and we anticipated that piece. But you know, it's a difference between whether that's going to be in the operating budget and whether that would be a one-time separate budget expense that, you know, would either need, if there's no other money from the government, we'd have to look to the town for it. And that's the conversation we had the other day.
So it would help me if I can review what I have for questions and concerns, and if I've missed anything, let me know. So, David, you want to know how many districts contribute to OPEB? Not that it matters now, but I'm going to move slide 13, which is the key points, to the beginning of the presentation. You're not.
I would say that in generally, anecdotally, I know that there's a lot of cities and towns that don't care what OPEB. They think if it comes to fruition, they'll bail us out. You know, we're one of a handful of towns doing OPEB.
Yep. The committee wants us to see what a 4.5% increase would look like, particularly what would we do with the additional $1 million. Holly made a good point about that the things are critical, have been, you know, identified as critical. So what would we do with that $1 million? Helen mentioned we need to address numeracy. We need to break out which items require space and which do not among these needs. Andrew's most concerned about the elementary level right now. And not that you're not concerned about the others, but.
Thank you.
Yep. And as Helen mentioned at the end, what does that mean, commitment to ensuring these one-time expenses are covered?
I hate to call them one time, because what if we need them in FY '23 too?
Well, that's exactly what my concern was.
Yep.
Yep.
Did I miss
Sorry.
anything?
Well, the thing I want to say on my question about the 4.5, I mean, our 5-year plan last year when we talked about it, we anticipated a 4.5% budget. I mean, I really thought we'd come today have a 4.5% budget. So I don't think that's looking for new things to spend on. It's not like you guys.
I'm not saying,
Okay.
I'm not saying new.
Okay.
I'm saying we would put into the column 2 for this year coming, what items would get, yep.
And I'm not necessarily tied to the fact that it's 4.5, right? I mean, if Mrs. Marks comes back and, you know, what we need, you know, for support for the kids, and it's 4.6, it's 4.6, it's 4.4, it's 4.4, but we don't know that, and we're asking for money, and there's no detail. We gotta get that. You say that we know what the needs are, but the needs aren't in the budget.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly, great question. And identifying what those needs are, the lower percentage, you know, slows down the plan. Some of it is space dependent, but we also know what those needs are. And those are the ones we anticipated as the COVID-related ones, as one-time expenses. Either way, you know, we want to support our kids wherever the money comes from to make that happen and get that support needed. And that's what we plan to do. So in the end, I think maybe we're saying the same thing. Some of you may be saying you want to put it in the operating budget built in and baked in. Others may feel it should be the COVID-related money.
I
But
guess my thing is, in my opinion, that COVID-related money is not guaranteed. If you go to town meeting and we get that 4.5, that's
Right.
that's the biggest difference. And you and I've had this conversation
Yep.
before. You gotta bake it into the operating budget.
Okay, so are the members satisfied that they've been able to express their concerns to the administration?
Do we express ourselves enough?
I'm not sure it was really clear. I think we may be singing from the same songbook and coming at it from a different way. I really believe that because our commitment is to our
So
students.
the question now is, Jim, do you have clarification of what you heard from the members? Do you need any?
I believe so. I would just ask if you felt like I had missed anything to let me know.
I think you get the big points.
Okay, and of course, individual members can reach out to the administrative team before our next meeting if they have other questions or concerns or things that they think about after this first presentation.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
question. I know you mapped out the schedule for us of January 28th, February 4th. Is there something really special about February 4th that we need to decide on the budget by? I know they want it by then, but is there a critical date for why that is?
I'll find out what the date critical is.
There's a charter
It-
date.
There is a charter date.
There's a date that we have to move, you know, you
I'm looking at
start
it.
working back from town meeting, and then you need to have it by, I know that it used to be maybe the 12th, it used to be maybe a week later, so there could be a little wiggle room, but I'll find out.
Yeah. The point is that what I was gonna say is, we come to an agreement by the 4th, but, you know, the numbers, there's plenty of time for the numbers to change between now and then. It's gotta go through another couple steps along the way between the town manager and the FinCom, so.
There's a calendar at the back of our whole binder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It says the charter 9-2-5 recommended operating budget issued to selectmen February 8th.
Recommended. That's a good word, like commitment.
I
I'm sorry, guys.
I think in the past, I mean, we have, you know, been relatively close to that. I think one year we missed it. I don't know if it was a snowstorm or something, but, you know, I mean, I think the goal is to get it in very early February so that they have time to assess in FinCom, right? I mean, if we gave it to them in May, I don't think that that's fair, but.
No, I just, it's always cracks me up when I see some cities, because their city council, they meet every 2 weeks, you know, they're passing a budget, you know, the fiscal year starts July 1st, they're passing budgets on June 25th,
Yeah.
you know?
And our schedule, David, these are when we set up the schedule for the year, we meet January 28, February 4, and then not again until February 25 because we have the school break in there.
Yeah, okay.
A little tricky.
Thank you, Madam
We
Chair.
possibly put in an extra meeting before the break in February. Not sure if there would be any reason that we couldn't do that if necessary. Okay. So that's the end of our agenda. We usually have a member go around in case anybody wants to report out on anything that they've experienced or seen or want to encourage the community knowledge of. And so I would do that if there's anyone who has anything they want to add at this time.
Nope.
Nope.
Oh, I'm all set. I thought we were shouting out if we had something to add.
I did too.
Okay, so hearing nothing to add, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second?
So it was moved by Mr. McDevitt and seconded by Ms. Vitsky Lynch. And is there any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote, starting with Mr. Teresi,
Yes.
Ms. Vitsky Lynch,
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt,
Yes.
Ms. Mably,
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. It is 9:09 on the 14th day of January 2021, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.